Mr. Evans. Ladies and gentlemen, as the judge has indicated, this is a weighing process. It's to weighing whether or not there are sufficient aggravating circumstances, and they've been listed in this crime to warrant the imposition of the death penalty. The state would submit to you that there are. And when you compare them to the weighing factor of any potential mitigating circumstances, any mitigating circumstances pale in comparison to the crime that was committed on these four people. And that there are sufficient aggravators to outweigh the mitigators. And that the appropriate sentence in this case is to impose the death penalty on each and every count in this case. Now, let's talk a little bit about the case. As we have indicated, the aggravating factors, prior conviction, which is the contemporaneous conviction of the four murders. That was done for avoiding arrest, and that's the witness elimination, which the court has instructed you on, and you have before you in the instructions. That it was for financial gain. It was done in a heinous, atrocious, and cruel manner. That it was cold, calculated, and premeditatedly done. And that 3 of the victims were under the age of 12. As the court indicated to you whenever he was going over the verdict form, there are going to be some aggravators that apply to some of the victims in this case, their murders, but not necessarily to all. For instance, we know right off the bat, number 6, we know that Brandi Peters was not under the age of 12, so that aggravating circumstance would not apply to her. You also know that, for the twins and for Javante, that the court, the jury or the verdict forms are not going to include an indication of whether or not financial gain being a motive in this case, as one of the dominant motives in this case, apply to them. And we also know that you will see that the purpose of avoiding arrest, the purpose of witness elimination, isn't being requested on Brandi Peters. So I'm going to go over the number of aggravators in line. Just recognize there will be some aggravators that will apply to some victims, some aggravators that will not apply in their murders. So, and I think the verdict form accurately reflects that. So the ones we're seeking in each of the individual murders are set forth in the verdict form. All right, the contemporaneous conviction. It includes, as noted, contemporaneous conviction for capital felony may qualify as a prior conviction. In this case, I think you will see that the evidence clearly shows that that aggravating circumstances is shown beyond a reasonable doubt in each of the crimes that have been committed. And that is because that in Brandi Peters' murder, that we see that there were other murders that occurred. In Brandi's case, the other contemporaneous convictions are for the 3 kids. And while there will be some photographs that were proposed that will be placed before you, I'll let you know now there will not be a tremendous amount, simply because you have them, you're able to review them. You reviewed them during the guilt phase. They were shown to you a lot. You know what they see, and you can imagine what they are, and go back and see what they are and compare them what they are should you have any additional questions. So I will do my best to limit those. So I believe in each and every case that there will be at least 3 contemporaneous convictions for murder that would apply in each of the 4 victims in this case. Therefore, I submit to you that that has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, and that you should find that aggravator exists. I also believe, whenever you take a look at the evidence, that you will, in your weighing process, that the weight given to that should be a very great weight should be placed on it. And very great weight should be because you have 4 victims in this case. This is not a case of a single murder. It is a multiple murder. It is a murder of a family. It is a murder of children. Now, the purpose of avoiding arrest. It was committed for avoiding or preventing lawful arrest or effecting escape. And as your jury instructions show, the judge has shown you that this applies where the dominant motive of the murder was to kill a witness. You know, the existence of other motives for the killing does not preclude the application of this aggravating circumstance. We have 3 kids. Now, these 2 young ladies had absolutely nothing to do with the child support in this case. The only reason the statement that they were killed is because they could identify the defendant. He had a choice, and we'll touch on this during the cold, calculated, premeditated part of it. If he wanted to eliminate Brandi Peters or eliminate Javante Segura, he didn't have to kill these 2 little girls. He had a plan. We know he had a plan. Again, we'll touch on it a little bit more. He went in either knowing they were there or not caring they were there, that he was going to kill everybody there. The reason these 2 little girls were killed was because if they weren't killed, they could have walked in this courtroom, walked up and got on that stand and said, "This is the man that killed my mama. This is the man that killed my little brother." We have Javante. It wasn't necessary that he kill him. He too could identify the defendant in this case as being the killer of his mama. The defendant's plan included going there and doing that killing and killing these witnesses. Because where were they earlier in the day? They weren't necessarily at home. He could have planned this when they weren't there. He could have lured Brandi Peters away from the home and did it there. But he elected not to. The murder was committed for financial gain. It takes a second for it to load. We have the fact that the child support payments were owed. They were coming to be owed. And he killed this family because he was trying to avoid that responsibility. We know he attempted to go in, and the dates of when all this occurred, everything started coming together. We'll touch it a little bit more on that cold calculated premeditated. But the dates were significant. Heinous, atrocious, and cruel. It means extremely wicked, shockingly evil. when you view the photographs of what occurred in that home, how it occurred, and why it occurred, these are very appropriate words. Extremely wicked, shockingly evil, atrocious, outrageously wicked and vile, cruel, high degree of pain with the utter indifference to or even enjoyment of the suffering of others. It's a kind of crime that's included is to be as especially as cruel one as comes by additional acts that show the crime is conscienceless, pitiless, unnecessarily torturous to Brandi Peters, Tamai Peters, and Tanai Peters or Devontae Segura. It also says in the jury instructions that the court read to you that, and I'll go back, designed to inflict a high degree of pain, utter indifference to or enjoyment of suffering of others. Again, we go back. He could have committed this crime of killing Brandi Peters without doing this to her children. We also know, as we're going through, the degree of injuries, and I'll take these as we go through each of the victims on the heinous, atrocious, and cruel. The number of injuries, remember this came from the autopsy report of Dr. Flanagan and through her testimony and the testimony of the other witnesses in this case as to the amount of injuries and the degree of injuries that occurred to Brandi Peters. Brandi Peters was shot. I believe the testimony was she had 8 wounds and there were at least 7 gunshot wounds. We know from the back of the house, from the bedroom, all the way through the house, even outside in front of the house, her blood was found. She fought back. We see the defensive wounds to the point where her nails were ripped off. We see where she was trying to block the blows that the 7 gunshots didn't kill her. But it took her being pulled back into the house and beat repeatedly on her head and face to kill her. Heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Brandi Peters was very aware of a number of things in this case that showed that this aggravator has been proven. She was very aware of the fact she was attempting to be killed. And at some point, maybe as she got drugged back in the house and started getting beat, she was very aware that she was going to die. She fought as hard as anybody you will ever see in this situation. From one in the house to the other, then pulled back in. Her hands up trying to block the blows that repeatedly fell on her head over and over and over and over and over. And I ask you another question. What kind of rage, what kind of hate, what kind of vile, what kind of wickedness played into the beating that this woman took? The other thing she knew, which probably is even worse, more vile, more wicked, more cruel than anything else, she knew she was going to die. but she needs 3 little babies to die with her. And they did. She died knowing that, and he killed her knowing she knew that. This aggravator has been proven. And it, if nothing else alone, warrants the imposition of the death penalty in her case. Heinous, atrocious, and cruel as it relates to the kids. Tamaya was shot in the back of the head. Tamaya's death, somebody could say, well, you could say it was somewhat merciful because she didn't have to go through the drowning that her siblings went through. She didn't have to go through the beating that her mother had to go through, shooting and beating. I submit to you, it was not merciful. It was merciless. In its own way, it was just vile, cruel, and wicked as anything else. Remember Henry Segura? He told, I believe they said at least 23 to 26 lies they were talking about, they were documenting as they were going through his statement. But one of the biggest lies he told that wasn't brought up then was his claim that he loved these children. Love doesn't do this. Wickedness, vileness, cruelty does this. To have a bullet put in the back of your head by somebody who you love, who's supposed to take care of you, is heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Tanaya Peters. Remember Dr. Flanagan talked about 10 to 20 seconds after they breathe in the water. So once the water is in the lungs, 10 to 20 seconds. Remember Mr. Fuchs stopped and waited 20 seconds. That's when you got water in your lungs and you can no longer breathe. The lights go out. Well, what did it take before you get the water in the lungs? Your mama has just been beat from one end of the house to another, shot multiple times. Remember the crime scene technique? Children get scared. What do? They run hide. They run hid. Unfortunately, it probably was in the bathroom. So they're hearing this horrendous event occurring outside. Sister has a bullet in the back of the head. Mama has been shot multiple times. Gunshots are ringing throughout the house, and you see it's not the largest house in the world. She's running up and down, trying to get out, trying to fight. Blood is everywhere. Everywhere. She's fighting back. Boom, 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 as she's getting hit in the face. And little ears are hearing this. Then in he walks. After what he did to Brandi Peters, we know he has to be covered in blood. Then he takes one. Maybe it was Devontae. You can see he's at the bottom of the tub. Someone he believes and knows is his daddy. Picked up, placed into the tub, and held down. And what's an actual reaction when you're in the water? Whether if you're 3 years old, you're going to try to get out of that water. You're going to try to stop. You're going to want to breathe. He's held down to the point where all he can do is gasp for air. And when that happens, his lungs fill up with water. And 10 to 20 seconds later, he's dead. Remember, this is after the 10, 20 seconds. The time he had to sit there and listen to his mama being killed, his sister being killed. The time he had to watch in horror as this man walked through the door, covered in his mother's blood. And then him be put in the tub and killed. That, I would submit to you, is heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Then Tanaya. Who is next in line? Now, she heard her twin sister being killed. Boom. And mind you, the defendant's having to reload during all this. His mama shot multiple times, fighting her way from one end of the house to the other, outside the house, back in. More gunshots still ringing out. And then the beating. She's trying to defend herself. Shot to pieces, but still trying to defend herself. All that going on. In walks Henry Segura into the bathroom. Holds Devontae down till he's dead. Then she's next. And this entire time, wondering what's going on, why this is happening, what's about her sister, what about her mama? Oh my God, what he just did to Devontae, and why is he doing this? Why is a man who professed to love me so much doing this? Then she goes into the tub. She's held down, struggling for her life. She gulps. Her lungs fill with air, or with water. Not the air she needs. And 10 to 20 seconds later, she's dead. Now, to accomplish this, took some planning, took some forethought. Decisions had to be made. Bridges had to be crossed. Cold, calculated, premeditated. Cold means the murder was the product of calm and cool reflection. Calculated means having a careful plan, a prearranged design to commit the murder. You know what killing through premeditation means. To this, there has to be a heightened level of premeditation to demonstrate that substantial period of reflection is required. And this one, a pretense of moral or legal justification. There's no way that Henry Segura can claim that he had any moral or pretense of legal justification for the crimes he committed. We have the dates. We know at some stage, November 3rd, gave him 14 days on the child support. Is this when he started thinking about it and planning it? We don't know. But we know when we look at what he did, how he did it, we know it was, he didn't just walk in and decide to do this all of a sudden on the spur of the moment. We have him outside the house for a very long time on that day, on the 17th at some point. There was some talking. We know she calls, Brandi calls DOR hotline on Wednesday. We know before the murders occurred, the defendant got up with Tyra Wilcoxon about trying to get the throwdown gun. That didn't work out. He had his own. He had the ammunition. He set up his alibi. He left his phone, his primary phone at home. The other phone he took with him. Some people may ask why. We needed to contact Brandi to make sure Brandi was there and everything else was on his schedule in order for him to get ready to commit this crime. We know he waited in the church parking lot for hours. If you wanted to kill just Brandi Peters, why didn't you kill when it was just her? Why didn't you isolate her? If you wanted just to kill Brandi Peters and Joe Devante, why not wait till it's just the two of them? He waited 4 hours, and in those 4 hours, he had his protective clothing, because we know there were not a lot of defensive wounds and stuff on him. We know he had enough ammunition with him. He brought enough ammunition to know if the 5 or 6 rounds he had in that revolver didn't work, that he may need more. Why? Because you got 4 people to kill. We have him killing Ms. Peters. We have him killing the 3 kids. Then he disposed of the evidence. And mind you, the cold, calculated, premeditated nature for each of these victims were, he knew Brandi Peters for sure was going to be there. That was somebody we know he fully intended to kill for everything he did. He also made sure the kids were there. He certainly didn't abort the plan because the kids were there. He carried enough ammunition to do the killing of the kids, and he did it. And when he ran out of bullets, he used what he had, which was the tub. Victims under 12 years of age. 6, 6, and 3. The aggravating factors. Previously convicted of a contemporaneous, or previously convicted a contemporaneous conviction of these murders. Proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Purpose for avoiding arrest, the witness elimination. proven beyond a reasonable doubt. There was no other reason to kill those kids but to eliminate them to being able to tell you who killed their mama. Financial gain. He wanted to do away with the Brandi Peters. You know, if you just want to kill Brandi Peters, kill Brandi Peters. If it wasn't for financial gain, then why is he killing Javante? Heinous, atrocious, and cruel. We covered that. Y'all know that it was. And the evidence shows that it was. And your verdict needs to show that these killings were just that. Cold, calculated, premeditated. That's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt in each of these murders. Been proven that these 3 children were under the age of 12. We ask you, in the case of Brandi Peters' murder, that you find the existence of the aggravating factors presented on the verdict form, each and every one of them. Find that they warrant the imposition of the death penalty. They are sufficient to impose the death penalty. The mitigating factors, the instructions you heard, anything you want to consider about his background, what he does or what he says, or lack of criminal history. Even if you find those, and I'm not suggesting that you should, but even if you find anything mitigating about Henry Segura, these aggravating factors outweigh any mitigation that you could find or should even consider. And we ask that you return with a recommendation of death being imposed in the murder of Brandi Peters. We ask that you return with a verdict of recommending death in the case of the murder of Tamaya Peters. We ask that you return with a verdict recommending death in the murder of Tanaya Peters. And we ask that you return with a verdict recommending death in the murder of Javante Segura. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.